G'day viewers. Well, there's a lot of talk around now about the new Star Wars movie. The Last Jedi's just opened. You might be thinking of seeing it. You might already have seen it. And when you go and see it, you may or may not like it. I've already seen it twice. It's fucking great. Now, you may not think that. Individual taste is exactly that. It's an individual thing. Someone's enjoyment of something is not necessarily going to be the same as yours. And that in and of itself means nothing objectively. It just means subjectively you experience differently and you appreciate different things. But one thing I think any rational person could look at and be a little confused, if you look on a site like Rotten Tomatoes that aggregates critics' scores of films, but also allows ordinary users of the site to rate and comment and review films, the disparity between the professional critics' reviews, the people whose job it is to look at and analyse films, and the public reviews is enormous. Like over 90% of professional critical reviews of The Last Jedi are positive, but very quickly the public viewing rating for Last Jedi started to go down. Last I looked, it was under 60%. That's an absurdly big divergence. Often what you'll get is a divergence in the opposite direction. Film critics don't like a particular film, but it appeals to fans of that genre or that franchise, and so the fans are far more favourably disposed towards a film than a critic. But for a film with such a big fan base as Star Wars, this is strange. I would go so far as to say unprecedented that the professional critics would be 90+% positive, and you have this fan review that's so low. What's going on? What is this all about? Turns out there's a relatively simple explanation. Sad little fuckwits, various misogynists and racists who congregate in festering little corners of the internet, got together and came up with a campaign to put out online that it was a bad film. Why would they do that, do you ask? Well, it's really simple. The diversity in the casting of the film. Both non-white characters and non-male characters being very liberally sprinkled in major, intermediate and minor roles. And there's a certain sort of subhuman that really fucking doesn't like that. And we've got to this wonderful point in history where the Venn diagram of hideous little misogynists and hideous little racists is basically a circle, and they feed off each other, and they've got their own little circle jerk happening. And they've done campaigns in the past, like most memorably for the all-female Ghostbusters, and they were very open in that it was the females that they hated, and then they'd say, oh, we don't like the film, but it was incredibly obvious that their angle was deeply misogynistic. Not saying if you didn't like the Ghostbusters remix that you're a misogynist. Again, personally, I liked it. I thought it was really funny. But, personal taste, personal taste. But if you're going to deny what was behind that campaign, you're either disingenuous or pretty goddamn stupid. More likely, a combination of the two. You're one of these evil little fucks and you think people can't see you for what you are. When I started telling people that this was an orchestrated campaign, I was like, how do they know? I was like, well, you see, the other funny thing about these little dweebs is they think no one's watching them. They think the only people on their forums are their friends, people who think the same as them. This is the same way that counter-protesters find out about racist protests because the boards are all infiltrated and the information gets fed out. And you go, but how do you stay under the radar? It's really easy because honestly, these fuckheads aren't all that perceptive. The general thing is, don't draw a huge amount of attention to yourself. Definitely don't get into arguments. Oh, and a really fun one is to occasionally stage something with a friend where you out them as, oh, look, I found one of those dirty lefty SJWs. Look, he's linked over here and I prove he's a bad person and we'll kick him out of the forum. And that makes you a hero. And personally, I also love making them paranoid. They all think, oh, I wonder if we're under surveillance. You are being watched by people that you don't want to be watched by all the time, you little fuckheads. So, yeah, the thing that doesn't appear to make any sense, this huge disparity between the critics' reviews and the public's reviews of The Last Jedi, it becomes pretty clear when you have this piece of the puzzle, that it's simply an orchestrated campaign. And they learned from their campaign against the Ghostbusters that they could be written off as like, well, they're clearly just nasty little racist, misogynist fuckheads. So the vast majority of the negative reviews of Last Jedi don't say anything about the diversity of the casting. They don't say they're upset about any female characters, any non-white characters. They talk about plot and various other things and say that's why they don't like it. Again, not everyone who's not a huge fan of Last Jedi falls into this category. I'm simply explaining how that divergence between the critics and the public score happened, because on the surface, it doesn't make sense. This little piece of the puzzle, now it makes perfect sense. So yes, if you're into the Star Wars, go see it. You may or may not enjoy it. I think it is most definitely among the best. No spoilers here. Fairly breakneck pace with the action for most of it. It's interesting, I read one review that talked about, oh, slow down a bit in that part. I hardly even noticed the bits where it slowed down because I was trying to draw breath from the bits where the action was going at 100 miles an hour. And shit just keeps happening. And yes, it has a cantina scene. And I think there are even references to the idea, as a lot of people justifiably pointed out, that The Force Awakens had far too many echoes of A New Hope in just structurally and sites and venues and scenes and whatnot. I think there's even little references to that in The Last Jedi. It's got lots of Easter eggs. It's funnier in a good way than any Star Wars film has ever been. Like, one of the hideous failings of the prequels was the attempts to put humour in, like with the robots and Jar Jar Binks, that were just fucking terrible, that in a perfect world we'd actually have George Lucas on trial for, but I kind of forgive him because he did invent the whole franchise and I do like it, so I'll cut him a little bit of slack, but that was terrible. But the humour in The Last Jedi is actually funny, surprisingly so. The balance is really well maintained, and I think it's got something for everyone. Again, if you don't like it, this does not necessarily mean you're a bad person. It does mean I will never listen to your opinion on anything ever again, but that's the freedom we have as people. You have the freedom to dislike a bad movie. I have the freedom to realise you have no fucking idea what you're talking about.